Okay, I have no idea how long I have to record here, but I'm going to try as best as I possibly can. Alright, I'm going to call this, the, Midnight Raid from the Flying Monkey. Um, Again, that's not an insult. Flying Monkey is a term that is used to describe, not necessarily the person that is a narcissist attacking, but rather the one of their supporters, Flying Monkey. And that's precisely what happened. Is that there's a flying monkey that came in and really hit me hard in the past couple hours, and successfully used some of the abuse counseling that I received down there at the Violence Prevention Center of Belleville, Illinois, to repel these attacks. And you have to celebrate little victories like this whenever you come under attack, and then just and you're successfully able to you tell these people off. Now this whole thing is about it's sort of about the family counseling appointment from last week. Last week I had a family counseling appointment I could do every week, but this time my oldest aunt wanted to be a part of it. So we went and we were a part of it, and one of the challenges that the family therapist gave was that the ultimate goal of all this is to reestablish contact without a family therapist present. I said that that is not what the my psychiatrist recommends. I said I would only be comfortable doing that if I had was recording the conversation the entire time. And this is the sort of reason why behind these things is whenever both parties consent to being recorded. That way they can't sneak other little things by. But I took the challenge at face value. Once the session ended last week, I asked my oldest aunt if she needed anything from me before I take off, and she said a hug. And I said, well, I've got a couple things that I'd like you to elaborate on. And one was, she had said that I was sort of a difficult person to get along with, and she spun it in a way where I didn't mean it, in a negative light. I meant it because you didn't accept the normal drudgery of 9 to 5 forever and just being miserable forever. This is something that my father has done at some point in time. He said some really mean, nasty, and ugly things that were, from the heart, from the soul, right? And then later, when asked to explain himself, he spins it as, oh, I had positive intention, and actually it was you who misinterpreted me, right? Everything that I do is very positive. I'm so misunderstood. Now, I know that's theory and conjecture. It's a he said, she said versus sort of situation. But that's what I heard, and that's the way that I interpreted it. But I let it slide. And said, okay, she doesn't necessarily see my bill-paying methods as being normal, and somehow or another that makes me harder to deal with. She never addressed how that somehow makes me harder to deal with than other people. Then I asked her about her disbelief in preliminary diagnoses. She had done all of this nonsense about preliminary diagnoses and how she doesn't believe them, and that doctors must meet a patient face to face to give any sort of diagnosis whatsoever. And so I really started to nail down that fact. I was trying to reestablish some common ground. My parents and it's possible that the Flying Monkey as well, my oldest aunt, has been given a preliminary diagnosis of clinical level narcissism. Now, the reason why this is first and foremost, they have this very one-sided relationship. They have this very one-sided view of life. Other people need to do everything, and they don't need to do a damn thing. It's the whole world that needs to change. It's not them. So that's the narcissistic part, but that's not super duper unusual or anything. It becomes clinical whenever I gave them full unedited access to my medical records, which state emphatically that their behavior caused a panic attack. And once their behavior caused a panic attack, I was at risk for that panic attack to turn into a heart attack and kill me. My father, my grandfather on my father's side, he died of his first ever heart attack. So if I'm put under that much stress, I might die. But the thing is, if I'm put under that much stress, I might die. But if anybody is put under that much stress and has enough heart attacks, they will eventually have one that kills them. I'm not extra specially vulnerable to stress or anything like that. It's just that, I had a family member that died of their first ever heart attack. They're putting this much stress on everybody equally. And they don't give a shit. The only thing that was ever asked of them by the abuse counselors and everything and all the medical professionals is, please treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. And for over 6 years, they have refused to do so. They've also claimed that they do so, while simultaneously doing crimes that made them go to prison and had to be bailed out by other people. And still, they've made the claim that, they do treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. And you're like, what about whenever you hit that guy? What about whenever you did that thing? And they're like, they don't want to talk about it. Because they know that they're lying. They're lying right out of their ass. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just trying to manipulate the situation because the mind of the narcissist can't even fathom that it can be wrong in any way, shape, or form. And we're going to see that moving into this. It becomes clinical whenever you receive proof that you're killing your child and you don't care. That's whenever this requires clinical intervention, is whenever you literally don't care whether or not you take someone else's life. You're a danger to society, and it requires medical intervention in order to move along. So, they've refused to treat other people the way they'd like to be treated. They've claimed that they are treating other people the way you'd like to be treated, whenever they know that that's untrue, and they admit that it's untrue whenever you challenge them. If they don't just cut contact right away and block you from Facebook and everything else and then run away to their own flying monkeys, and whoever will, they're yes men, whoever will agree with them, so they'll admit it if they don't just run away. But also they've refused to learn how. I've given them plenty of resources to learn how to receive therapy and everything for free, to receive it from a distance, whenever they've claimed that they simply don't have the time for therapy, usually in a phone call over the phone after I've already told them about telehealth opportunities. They have the time to call me, but they don't have the time to speak the exact same way that they're speaking right now, but to a therapist. I've offered to clean their homes or cook them dinner or take out the trash. I've even offered to build them a log cabin. My mother in particular loves log cabins. I said, I can build you a log cabin. You can live in a log cabin. That way you'll own your home, and you won't have to pay those bills. So I've offered them many ways out of their situations, many things for their excuses, whether it's I can't afford it, I found them free resources, whether it's I don't have the time, I've offered to help them to reclaim more time, or I can't afford the gas to drive to it. Okay, well, here's some stuff from a distance. It doesn't matter. They've just refused to do all this for over 6 years. They've got definitive proof via the medical records that they're killing their child. They don't give a shit, and they're not going to stop. And they won't do. There's not a small enough favor for them to do, and there's not enough evidence to convince them of this, and they can't find a single thing wrong with the medical records. So instead, they just keep attacking me for over 6 years because of what the doctor said about them. It just never ends. Either way, so I go back and forth with my oldest aunt after the family counseling session was over last week, and I'm trying to establish some common ground. Narcissists like to take the ground from underneath your feet. They like to pull the rug out from underneath your feet. They want to live in a world where all is permitted for the narcissist, and nothing is permitted for anybody but the narcissist. They want to live in a very wishy-washy world so that everything is a matter of opinion. And then once you get to everything is a matter of opinion, all they have to do is be the loudest person in the room, and they have the strongest opinion. So it's as easy as that. So I'm trying to reestablish some ground in between us. It's something that I've been taught in therapy over the past 6+ years and everything. Once I got my diagnosis, once I got out of the psychiatric inpatient program. That's the loony bin, in case you didn't know. But I've got my diagnoses, I've got my medications, I've got my therapy and counseling and everything. But they continue to keep on, right? But so she's constantly trying to pull the rug out from underneath your feet, and one of the things that I was taught in therapy is to constantly just reiterate the facts. Once you reiterate the unarguable facts, then go from there. Then you can discard opinion, and then it doesn't have to go into this he said, she said opinionated thing where you're just arguing over whether your favorite color is red or blue or something like that. You restate the facts, and then you move on from there. And that way both parties can get, solid ground underneath their feet. And that's precisely what I was trying to do. I was saying, like, okay, so if you don't believe in preliminary diagnoses, then do you believe in medicine at all? Because my oldest aunt works in healthcare. And she said, oh, I believe in medicine, I just don't believe in preliminary diagnoses. And I said, okay, well, do you believe in, psychiatric and psychological healthcare? Eventually she says, no, I don't. And her evidence is her anecdotal experiences. And of course, whenever your only evidence is anecdotal, it's inadmissible as a reference, right? Anybody who's gone to any English class can, do this. If you say, I've met a psychologist and he was full of shit. He was out there ranting about how the sky was red. I could say, well, I met a psychologist and he wasn't full of shit and he was out there ranting about how the sky is blue. And, he was obviously correct. So that way we're at an impasse. That's the opinion piece. That's why anecdotal evidence is not admissible in your standard academic and scientific environment, right? We're at an impasse. We're both human beings. We're both completely equal, and we've had opposite reactions. Therefore, we've had opposite experiences, so we're going to have to move outside of ourselves to actually find the solution to the problem. But of course, the narcissist isn't trying to find a solution for the problem. The narcissist is trying to hurt you. That's what they're trying to do. And so I was trying to establish this common ground, and I said, okay, well, you don't believe in psychiatric, psychological personnel and medicine. Your only source for why you disbelieve in these things is because of your personal experiences, your anecdotal experiences. And I said, okay, well, and then she called in her roommate and asked him what the definition of preliminary diagnosis is. He gave it, and then he left. And after that, she walked back that statement. Okay, I do believe in psychological, psychiatric personnel. However, preliminary diagnosis. I have a problem with it, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, okay, well, what about whenever there's an incident? Whenever somebody does something that's against the law or otherwise, everybody is very, very clear on this incident. And so I gave an extreme example. I said, what about that Canadian guy that was on that bus? You remember? There was a Canadian guy that was on this bus, and he suddenly stood up, beheaded his fellow passenger, and then started to eat his head. That's a pretty extreme circumstance. Would you believe in the preliminary diagnosis of, paranoid schizophrenia that a medical provider would give to that situation? And would you at least agree that there needs to be some sort of intervention? Now that there's been this preliminary diagnosis, obviously this guy needs his head checked at a bare minimum to stop him from beheading and eating another bus passenger. And she said, and I quote, no. She said, if I was in the shoes of that bus in Canada, maybe the guy who was beheaded, maybe I would think that the guy had a really tasty head. And I would have done the same thing. So even the very, very basics of the most extreme situation, she wouldn't give any ground whatsoever. So then she does a non sequitur. And she says, hey, I've received some really bad treatment by this very specific person. What would you say his preliminary diagnosis is? And I said, what his preliminary diagnosis is, because you received it from his doctor over 30 years ago. It was post-traumatic stress disorder. And she said, bullshit, bull fucking shit. You don't get post-traumatic stress disorder and then mistreat me the way that he did. You just undid everything. And I said, that's just what the doctor said. And she said, go home. So I went home. And that was the end of our session, and it was the last time that I talked to her. So that was last week's family counseling. What about this week's family counseling? So I went ahead and I sent out an email reminder the night before and said, hey, family counseling tomorrow at 4 o'clock, just like it always is. And I give some of the things that I've learned in the past week or so. Some of the things I've learned from my interpersonal psychotherapy group on Tuesdays at Veterans Affairs, and things that I've learned through other sources. See, a long time ago, whenever I was married to an active duty service member, she was away on deployment, and while she was away on deployment, she didn't talk to me all that much, and I was sitting there worried sick about her all the time. So eventually I took this class called Love Long Distance. Now I actually have receipts from this. You don't have to take my word for it. I can actually go back in my email and show that I took this class and everything. So, in case you have your doubts and you think, oh, I'm actually a mean, rotten, nasty spouse. No, I actually took the class. You can see that I attended, blah, blah, blah. In the class, they said, hey, sometimes your spouse can be really busy on deployment. I was never on deployment myself whenever I was active duty. And so it said, just tell them about your day. Just tell them about your day. Remind them that you're a human being and that you have normal human being thoughts and feelings and everything. Don't be accusatory. Don't try to guess what they're doing. Don't try to make, assumptions about what they're doing and everything. Just, if they're not talking to you, just give them the daily update. Just go ahead and give them, what you've been doing today and everything. and tell them you love them, wish them well. And he said, at the bare minimum, if you're going to divorce them, wait until they get back from deployment. It's what you would want done to you. I said, okay, that was the love long distance class, so that's what I'm doing. My parents won't talk to me. I hadn't spoken to my oldest aunt since last week, so, last night or the night before, since I'm obviously recording this at 1 in the morning, 1:30, because of that, I went ahead and I reminded them, hey, tomorrow's the family therapy. It's at 4 o'clock, just like it is every week. Every week at 4 o'clock in the evening on Thursday. And here's what I've learned in the past week. That's all I can do is try to learn about their condition. Try to learn about how I can deal with it. The stuff that I found in my journals, what my my therapists and medical professionals have taught me, etc. So here we go. All right. Tomorrow's family counseling session is at 1600. Here's your reminder for my weekly family therapy session, journaling about last week's session, and going through my interpersonal psychotherapy group session on Tuesday made me realize something. The entire argument that all of three of you have used, stating that I've either hallucinated my abuse or lied about it, is not just an argument that you have no evidence for, but also one you actually have proof against. You all have access to my full, unedited medical records. If there was an incident represented in it that you can actually say whether or not it happened and prove it, you can ask the other people present at such an incident. You can come to a consensus about what actually happened, but none of you have done any of that, not even for a single incident. My oldest aunt said last week that she doesn't trust someone can be diagnosed from a distance. Sorry. But that's not true either. From telehealth to diagnosis via correspondence and snail mail, this has happened plenty of times in history, and since none of you have managed to find a single incident that was misrepresented in my files, you all agree that these incidents occurred. Simply open up the DSM-5, which is how they diagnose mental disorders, and see if that matches the symptoms of the illnesses the doctors have given you a preliminary diagnosis for. It's easy as pie. Of course, you have the option to exonerate yourself either with the many telehealth and distance services I've given you and free services I've given you. Sorry, there's a crack in my screen right at that word, so I had to guess. And so the many free and telehealth resources I've given you, or the concrete nature of a SPECT scan. Now, Dr. Daniel Amen's SPECT scans, he swears that by looking at SPECT scans, he can actually diagnose. It's sort of like looking at an X-ray. You can actually diagnose mental disorders by looking at a SPECT scan. He's been trying to prove this for something like 40 years. It's pretty new technology. So the concrete nature of a SPECT scan proving mental fitness or lack thereof once and for all. None of you have taken advantage of those resources either, and it's been over 6 years. Last week, my oldest aunt said that she hasn't read my medical records, but that carries with it the same excuses as the others. You can always get a robot to read it to you through myriad free programs at 2, 4, or even 10 times speed while driving, in the shower, or otherwise in your downtime. That's how I listen to my old messages for accuracy. Last week, my oldest aunt also feigned outrage at the diagnosis the doctors gave that particular person that mistreated her so much during his court-mandated therapy he attended somewhere around the time of my birth, if not a little bit earlier. She said the same things in the same order about it that she'd done a few years ago at Easter in front of other family members as witnesses, deciding to punish me for what the doctor said about him. That was that incident that ended our session last week. But regardless of your collective view that your adverse childhood experiences are a get-out-of-jail-free card, which you selectively decide not to listen to the Center of Disease Control about. Center of Disease Control has the Adverse Childhood Experiences Index. You all know that those very same experiences and the associated illnesses don't affect all people the same way. You people and my oldest aunt agree, my mother and my oldest aunt agree that the same thing happened to them, but only my oldest aunt tried to self-harm and harm others. My father agrees that not all men who lost a father abandon their children, so this false outrage about a diagnosis over 30 years old is flawed from the start by your own individual admissions. You can see how that's confusing to outside observers like myself. Either way, you have your reminder and invitation to attend. Last week really helped reinforce my resolve to cut contact with the family. You all have the medical records stating your behavior nearly caused my death. You all know that the dead can't contact you, and you have zero evidence my medical records are somehow flawed or incorrect. So you all know I either cut contact for my own health and safety or due to my death by your hands. It's as simple as that. Do I cut contact while I'm alive or not? It's an easy but inevitable choice. I love you all unconditionally. Very respectfully, Matthew Roger Motley. That's my name. Don't wear it out. So she hits me with this a few hours ago. She says, "Stop misrepresenting and misquoting me. I said that you can't diagnose someone long distance by third person. And one individual cannot go to a second individual and describe the symptoms of a third individual and have person 2 make an accurate differential diagnosis of person 3 based on that description. There's a name for that. It's called conjecture. People have stated and made arguments for opinions about historical characters, possibly having whatever possible mental health conditions, but that isn't diagnosis. Yeah, but it is preliminary diagnosis, and she knows that. Also, I wasn't outraged that you said that the person that mistreated me had post-traumatic stress disorder. You know damn good and well that what you said is that his post-traumatic stress disorder is what caused him to mistreat your mother and I. That's what's under the blank here. Bullshit, and fuck your sensationalist attention-seeking behavior in the fictional world in which you reside. That person told me himself that he was only in the army for a few months and didn't do anything in the war that he was a part of. As soon as he arrived, he wrote home and told his family members that he needed to get out of there as soon as possible, so she wrote his chain of commands stating that since his dad had had a heart attack and his brother had a deferral from being away at colleges, she needed him to come home and farm. And that's what happened. He got sent home to farm. You can have him write and sign and notarize a statement saying otherwise, but then I might believe the post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis that you have so benevolently bestowed upon him. But that still does not excuse the years of mental, physical, emotional, and mental abuse that we suffered at his hands. You're so glib and dismissive of everyone else's lies, while every breath everyone ever took in your direction has so horribly and irreparably damaged you that you just can't function as a human being. I also told you that I don't listen to books on tape or anything similar because I have both ADD and auditory processing disorder, both determined by qualified medical professionals. I'm literally unable to read and retain information that way. Additionally, I have zero motivation to make every moment of my life all about you. You can separate yourself from the family if you want. I no longer have any problem about this decision on your part. Although I would appreciate you if you would still give me the contact information for the counselor we talked to that day. I found him much easier to talk to than any I have worked with before. By the way, for anyone else on this list, should you actually read any of this, the incidences of the conversation that it refers to and herein occurred after the counseling session has ended. His behavior was entirely different when there was a mediator involved. I'm out. Sayonara. So, a few things here. Fuck your sensationally attention-seeking behavior in the fictional world in which you reside. Fictional world in which I reside. That right there, that little bit and piece of that, it's an attack. Of course, it's an attack. It's ad hominem, right? That's the logical fallacy at play here, that this is ad hominem. But it's a specific attack that, that I have a warped worldview. They're trying to convince me that I'm crazy, while my, medical professionals are saying that I'm not crazy. Again, one of the tools that the abusive narcissist likes to use quite a bit is the tool that is gaslighting, right? You probably heard it before, gaslighting. It's whenever something occurred and they try to convince you that it didn't. Or at least it didn't occur the way that you thought it was. It did. Stuff like that. So that's why it's very important for people like this for you to record the conversations. If they don't agree to being recorded, then there's something wrong, right? These sorts of things. Blah, 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 blah. Glib and dismissive. Those are unprovable things. Can't prove them right or wrong. I also told you that I don't listen to books on tape or anything similar because I have ADD and auditory processing disorder. This is the first I've heard of it. I don't remember her ever telling me this before. And if she did, then she probably has some proof, right? She probably has a Facebook message where she sent it to me or something like that. And maybe I just forgot, but this is the first I've heard of it. It explains some stuff, but it's the first I've heard of it. I'm not being insulting. There's nothing wrong with being mentally ill, just the same as there's nothing wrong with being ill. Having auditory processing disorder, it doesn't matter. It's just something that happened to you, like me being nearsighted and having to wear glasses. It's no big deal. So, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here we go. I said, if a commander in the trenches describes the symptoms of a patient, a doctor can diagnose said patient over the phone and over correspondence and has many times in the past. It is not conjecture if the incidents are recorded in my medical records and you have no evidence that these symptoms described are not accurate in some way. Plenty of patients cannot speak for themselves, and the doctor cannot get to them, and they rely on a third person to relay the information about the patient. Your feelings and belief about medicine do not change medicine, and the history of medicine applied. Again, she works in medicine. If she doesn't believe in it, why continue working in the field? It isn't diagnosis, it's preliminary diagnosis, as I've been saying all along, with email, text, and Facebook messages proving so. You asked, what was the preliminary diagnosis for the person that mistreated you? You did not ask, why do medical professionals believe that that person who mistreated you? Your roommate was in the living room and likely overheard the question, so we can ask him. What's clear is that now you can't be trusted to remember your own questions, and I will not agree to to speak with you again if you do not agree to being recorded for the entire interaction. Now that sounds like I'm gaslighting. You can't be trusted. I don't like that phrase. You can't be trusted. That's a narcissist phrase. I don't have to stoop to these people's level in order to fight back. I don't. But the offer to, hey, let's just record it next time. That's something that gets rid of all of this. I can't gaslight somebody on a recording. Recorder recorded what it recorded. So it gets rid of all future things. Right now, I don't trust you. But in the future, we don't have to have this argument at all. We can simply have it be trusted. Have this outside observer that's able to go back and forth. I literally said that's what the doctor said, and you said go home, and I did. At no point in time did I say what I believe. I simply repeated the diagnosis that the doctor gave about another person, and you decided to punish me for it. That is what happened, and you have your roommate as a potential witness. No amount of your gaslighting will change what occurred. It doesn't make sense that I would suddenly switch from speaking about preliminary diagnoses to my personal belief about anyone's diagnosis. You want to lie about what I said? Well, it's time for you to whip out any evidence whatsoever. It's these specific incidents that make you three so dangerous to speak to without a family counselor present or without being digitally recorded. I didn't benevolently diagnose that person who mistreated you with post-traumatic stress disorder. His doctor did. You've already been made aware of his diagnosis and reacted the same way years ago on Easter with family witnesses. I learned about his diagnosis from a certain member of my family and confirmed it with him. His medical records are laying all around the farm for anyone to grab, and his military records are in the safe by the television. Simply ask and he'll retrieve them. I'll say this for the 100th time to all three of you. Please stop punishing me for what the doctor said. You have access to the medical records. You know which doctor gave which diagnosis and when. Please stop shooting the messenger. The person who mistreated you claimed that he didn't do anything in the time in which he was at war. That's a combination of humility and the men of his time not wanting to speak about what they did and saw. He since at times spoke of bodies that he's seen on occasion, whether at napalm sites or bombing sites or wherever he was. You can look up his unit and where they were. Confirm his unit patrolled bombing sites. Ask yourself whether they bombed sites because the enemy was there or just for no reason. If they bomb sites because enemies are there, then are the enemies still there for them to see when he patrols those sites? Yes or no? Can seeing the aftermath of war actions cause post-traumatic stress disorder? Yes or no? At the end of the day, you have the diagnosis, who gave it, the military records, everything that you need to connect these dots yourself. Stop punishing people for referring to the contents of documents that you simply don't feel like double-checking. I'm sorry about the last page. I apparently forgot to blank out somebody's name. I don't want them to come under attack for the stuff that I'm already coming under attack for. Either way. As per my last email, people respond to the same illnesses different ways. If you abuse children, the scientific, academic, lawmaking, and medical consensus is that there's something wrong with you. You're mentally ill. That mental illness has a name. Not everyone responds to mental illnesses the same way. Once again, having post-traumatic stress disorder is not an excuse to do anything bad to anybody. One person with post-traumatic stress disorder abuses their kids, another beats his wife, yet another murders a vaguely Asian-looking guy due to flashbacks from the war. All three need medical intervention. The last guy still goes to jail for murder. No matter your illness, you still have to take responsibility for your actions. You and my mother both suffered the same by your own admission from the same person. Only you tried to self-harm and harm others. You know as a matter of undeniable fact that different people react differently to the exact same stimuli. Now, before the last week's session, I had sent out an email stating that, hey, this is what I've learned from the book that my psychiatrist is having me read, which is the book Driven to Distraction, which is about what I've been diagnosed with, which is adult attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And, I said, I said, hey, I apologize. It must have been hard for you to deal with me my entire life without ever having this diagnosis or any medication whatsoever to treat it. I'm really sorry about all of that. With that in mind, of course, if I could snap my fingers, I would remove any mental illnesses from my body in an instant because, of course, they all have side effects. Would have rather have been a normal boy. So it's not necessarily my fault, but I'm still taking responsibility for my actions, right? I'm apologizing. And also, I'm thanking you for putting up with me all these years. So that's the email that I sent out before last week's family therapy session, and because I sent that out, my family therapist during the session commended me for taking responsibility for my actions. This is something that sort of went over my oldest aunt's head. It seems to go over all three of these characters' heads. Either way. So, that's going to come up here in a second. That's why I took the time to tell you that. Alright, so after World War II, attacks by veterans on anyone even vaguely Asian skyrocketed. Look it up. Spousal and child abuse were common. The person who mistreated you, or actually, my grandmother's father was in the war in the East. and was your stereotypical alcoholic, abusive man. He died that way. Now, let's compare him to Zampini. Zampini was in the War of the East. He broke a world record for being adrift in the sea following a plane crash. He was held as a Japanese prisoner of war until their surrender. And he was the star of the 2 films and 1 novel called Unbroken. However, after the war, he was a traveling drunk, beating his wife, and she introduced him to a church with a TV/radio preacher. He was asked to come up and tell his story. Through telling his story repeatedly, it lost its power over him. He forgave his captors and stopped beating his wife. Zampini was lucky. My grandmother's father died in poverty. I, quote-unquote, did nothing during my time in service. I never shot a gun, and I was never shot at. This is true. But in 2007, one of my classmates from A school, which is where we learn how to do our job in the Navy, Master at Arms A school in 2007, one of my classmates from A school was killed at her first duty station in Bahrain, known as the 2007 Bahrain shooting. I received counseling as a result. Later in 2008, my first roommate in Korea fell off of a flagpole in a drunken stupor, breaking his back. I had to ride with the base doctor to the hospital to deliver him supplies many times. His lungs kept filling up with blood. He remains paralyzed to this day. His name is blank blank. I don't want to, draw any attention to these people, but you can look it up. In 2009, my boss, another person that I don't want to draw attention to, but I'm giving the name to, my family member, so they can look them up and they can independently verify, okay, this is this person. He was in this place at the same time that Matthew was, right? My boss was sent to his next duty station with blessings. We used to call him Wikipedia because there was nothing that he didn't know. He also slept with just about every woman that went within miles of the base. Consensually, of course. He worked hard, he played hard, he performed exquisitely. He also punched his own ticket at his next duty station. I got to watch his chain of command frame it as an attack so that his baby mama could get his life insurance. In late 2010, I began my last 4 months active duty burying dead veterans in honor guard. I also started drinking. There was no one who wasn't affected by honor guard service, which is why it was normally limited to a 3-month-long duty. But since I only had 4 months left on my contract, they said, okay, go ahead and stay there and do that. So I did. It took me months to stop drinking after I left active duty. It took me nearly a year to accept counseling through Veterans Affairs. The first time I tried to walk in, I saw a quadriplegic veteran being wheeled out. I said they need it more, and I went home. I spent years being counseled for survivor's guilt. No, nothing happened to me during my time in service, but my nuclear, biological, and radiological instructor at Tinker Air Force Base had ground his teeth down to nubs after witnessing a swimming pool full of dead bodies while he was in Fallujah. Just like the 9/11 responder featured in Michael Moore's documentary Sicko. I myself grind my teeth in my sleep, and the dental instructors at Lewis and Clark Community College have told me to wear a mouth guard at night. This is true. At no point in time did anyone even imply that the person who mistreated you, their diagnosis, excused the years of abuse that you suffered. During this session last week, my family counselor commended me for apologizing for my actions despite my illness in the email reminding you all of the appointment the night before it occurred. It's like you three can't even fathom someone taking responsibility for their actions despite any illnesses that they might have, so you just ignore it when it happens, in one ear and out the other, pretending that it didn't happen at all. Here's what my medical records state unequivocally. Your behavior nearly led to my death, and the only thing that you need to do to stop being a danger to myself and others is to treat others the way you would like to be treated. You've been thus far unable to do so, so it's a painless procedure to simply learn how. Without a shred of evidence that my medical records and those who wrote them are incorrect, tell me, does your illness give you permission to murder a veteran of 2 military branches? I had my time active duty, I had my time in the active drilling reserves, and of course I joined up with Army Senior Reserve Officer Training Corps, and was eventually denied a commission shortly before I went into the loony bin. Yes, that does count as military service. I know now, as a matter of fact, because both of my branches are on my veteran proof of service in my VA portal. It's really cool. I really like it. So now I got that definitive, I like it. It doesn't matter what people think about SROTC. No, I've got definitive proof of both branches of service. Anyways. So, can you find any academic, scientific, lawmaking, or medical consensus to support the argument that it's okay to kill me? It's time to do the legwork. I'm constantly proving myself with evidence. It's your turn now. Glib and dismissive are labels that can't be proven, and that's why you use them. I mentioned that earlier. My medical providers agree that I'm not glib and dismissive. Then you accuse me of being unable to function as a human being. Then what have I been doing? Being an alien? Where's your proof of this? The objective reality is that I've accomplished more than both of my parents combined, far faster and with far less resources. I stay in school, I don't do drugs, I have a clean criminal record and 2 degrees, 2 branches of the military under my belt. What specifically am I doing wrong, and where's your proof? What would you rather have me do? This is why both recording and medical intervention is needed. You 3 just keep attacking me without a shred of evidence. You want to hurt me. The medical records prove that you hurt me. Hell, you nearly killed me. So why isn't that enough for you? You literally won't even stop when I'm dead. That much is obvious about how you talk to one of our how you talk about one of our deceased family members. Go get medical help. The mission you're insistent upon cannot be accomplished until you at the very least define the parameters and get some evidence that they're true and even able to be accomplished. Now, one of the other things I want to go back to here. It's one of the things that she said. You're so glib and dismissive of everyone else's lies, while every breath everyone ever took in your direction has so horribly and irreparably damaged you that you just can't function as a human being. Now, at no point in time have I ever made this claim, and again, everything that I'm saying is being backed up by my actual medical professionals in the medical records that they have unedited access to. Unedited, unrestricted access to my medical records. They have this access, and still, they're trying to paint this image like I'm exaggerating. Well, if I'm exaggerating, then my doctors are, and if my doctors are exaggerating, they must be full of shit. So if they're full of shit, then you have some sort of proof, right? Right? To constantly say attack after attack after attack. I got to convince this guy that he's crazy. I must convince this guy that he's crazy. And for why? Why would they want to convince me that I'm crazy? So that they can continue not treating me the way that they'd like to be treated. And what's the result of not treating me the way that I'd like to be treated? I had a panic attack. My medical professionals intervened and said that I was at danger of having a heart attack and dying of my first ever heart attack, much like my grandfather on my father's side. They want to hurt me. They are trying to kill me. I have the medical evidence that they're trying to kill me. This is my oldest aunt fighting so hard to continue hurting other people. It's not just me. Again, I'm not Superman. They're not kryptonite. They know they're hurting other people. They have unrestricted access to the medical records proving so. They do not care, and they are fighting to continue hurting other people. And the entire time, they're fighting to hurt me. They're trying to hurt me. You can cry, you can kick, you can scream, but if you take this video and show it to anybody working at the Violence Prevention Center in Belleville, Illinois, any of the abuse counselors, they'll tell you the same thing. These people are trying to hurt this Matthew Roger Motley guy. They're the people. Abuse counselors decide what is and isn't abuse, and they can show you the scientific evidence of the damage that it can do to somebody. This is written in stone. These people are trying to hurt me. Period. They're trying to keep hurting everyone around them, because I'm not extra specially vulnerable to these attacks. Okay. Does attention deficit disorder and audio processing disorder actually prevent you from listening to these books on tape? Not according to any medical professionals that I've encountered. I've had the maximum possible dosage of atomoxetine for years. I literally have the most severe attention deficit hyperactive disorder a human can be diagnosed with objectively as an adult. But did dyslexia stop two of our family members from reading or getting a high school equivalent education? No. Did numbers dyslexia prevent my brother's math teacher from teaching him math? No. If you genuinely cannot do something because of a condition, get a doctor's note. I do. You don't. And I don't make my life all about you guys. I'm out here doing pre-med classes, which are empirically, statistically at the very least, the hardest classes undergraduate education has to offer. I'm just going on statistics. This is the last time I checked the statistics. The highest failure rate was in especially the pre-med barrier classes, they called it. That's the last time I checked the statistics. It might have changed. Maybe engineering majors are having a particularly hard time right now. I don't know, but it's the last time I checked. Anyways, so I'm building a cabin out here. I'm helping out on the farm, and you're sending me Facebook messages while you're at work. I was doing college classes and teaching English to children while active duty without a single prescription for any of my illnesses. You even have objective proof that it's not all about me. Once again, I'm not Superman. You're not kryptonite. You're affecting all people with your behavior equally. But still, no matter the amount of evidence I gather, it's never enough. And no amount of evidence I request from you is a small enough favor for you to actually gather it yourself. Academically, lawmaking-wise, scientifically, and medically, you're doing the wrong thing and you have proof. I'm doing the right thing and you still have proof. My medical records. Prove me wrong. You no longer have a problem with my separation from the family because I repeated the opinion of a doctor that you already knew from a diagnosis that's nearly as old as I am, if not older. If you're going to make a decision, just make it out loud and be honest about it. Say it with your chest. I'm punishing Matthew because of what a doctor said 30 plus years ago. If your auditory processing disorder is what caused you to mishear that diagnosis, perhaps it would behoove you to record your own conversations between other people. But you've got to answer that personal question. Why, in a conversation about preliminary diagnosis from other people, would I personally switch to my private opinion about one? Does that make sense? Is that something I or anybody would do? Where's your proof? What is my motive in that situation? I had just apologized for my behavior despite my illness. So why would I change my mind and state that an illness excuses another person's actions the very next day? Does the image inside your mind of me match anything in reality to anyone? And of course, ask your roommate if he overheard precisely what I said. As for the name of that counselor, I send you the actual link to his profile at his company several emails ago and in a Facebook message. His name is blankety blank. My behavior matched your own during the session you read from your notes. I asked 2 questions from my notes, and then you said that if I was like the Canadian bus cannibal, maybe I'd think that my fellow passenger had a really delicious head. Then you excused actual murder and cannibalism, while maintaining that your parents alone are evil and refusing to define what you meant by evil, or asking me, a minister, to perform. I'm a minister of the Universal Life Church Ministry. It took me like 5 minutes to become a minister. I saw it on TV. I didn't believe them, and 5 minutes later I was a minister. I was like, oh crap, they were right. Anyways, there's a Universal Life Church minister that married my youngest aunt and her husband. So hey, it's a real thing. You can do work with it. I don't know. Anyways, so asking me, a minister, to perform some sort of exorcism to get rid of such evil, and then you confess that you do not believe in psychological or psychiatric health care due to anecdotal experiences before walking back that statement, all while repeating that you do not believe in preliminary diagnosis, calling your roommate in to ask about preliminary diagnosis, claiming that a mechanic can get sued by saying what you're describing about your vehicle sounds like a problem with the radiator, but bring it in the shop and we can make sure, when neither the person who owns ACT Auto Body in Alton, Illinois, was never sued for that, and whenever he did that exact action, nor was my stepfather at the time while he worked there. This is because, I said, of course, people can give preliminary diagnosis. And she said, no, you would get sued. And I said, if you called a mechanic over the phone and said, my car's making a noise like, and they said, that sounds like the timing belt, she would say, she said, oh, they would get sued if you could say that. And it's bullshit. She knows it. These sorts of non sequiturs and everything, I call them red herrings. It's something that I see narcissists do a lot. They try to move the goalpost by getting you distracted with any argument whatsoever, so they can get back into the, opinion versus opinion argument, and then just be the loudest person, so their opinion wins. And so she's going all over the place. Anyways, so you asked for the preliminary diagnosis for the person who mistreated you. Said I undid everything after I repeated the diagnosis that you already knew from 30 plus years ago. Then I said that's just what the doctor said, and you said go home and slam the door to your office, trapping your dogs inside with me. None of which that you'd done during the therapy session. Oh, and of course you ignored the challenge from the therapist that you supposedly want to continue working with, when he said not to discuss these big things over email and not to cut off communication simply because he's not present. I love you all unconditionally. Use some of the resources that I've given you. They'll improve your life. And you have no evidence that they won't. You can even text therapists now, for free even. All the time that you spent typing this out, you could have been improving your mental health and your life. So she fires back. I literally said to you, so are you saying the person who mistreated us and did all the things that he did because he had post-traumatic stress disorder? And you said yes. And I told you that you could go, and I left. This is a claim. This is not what she said. And again, it's very, after she asked her roommate for the definition of preliminary diagnosis, he left and left the door open and was sitting in the living room, just one room over. He likely overheard precisely what I said. But there's no cameras on her, there's no mediator, so this is an opportunity for her to gaslight, and she's going in hard. She's really going in hard. All whenever she just said, my auditory recollection cannot be trusted. Either way, she's sure about this. And she's, I can't read books. I've got auditory processing disorder. I can't have emails read to me. I have auditory processing disorder. Oh, but I know for a fact what you said and why I was so pissed about it. Whenever it's just not true. Okay. She said, proof. That's all you say while you make up bullshit. That's another thing. You make up bullshit. Oh, we gotta convince this guy that he's crazy. And what do you do whenever you're crazy, ladies and gentlemen? You go to therapy. And what did I do today? I went to family counseling. Well, I should say last night at 4 o'clock. Yesterday at 4 o'clock in the evening, I went to family counseling. And what did I do on Tuesday? I went to interpersonal psychotherapy, a group session with the Veterans Affairs. I'm going to therapy. She's not. It's very fucking clear. It's very... You have to remind yourself of these things, because whenever these people come at you, they're very confident. And you have to... you got to use your moves. You got to defend yourself. Like I said, if anybody wants to go down to the Violence Prevention Center in Belleville, Illinois, they do accept clients for free. You can learn all the kung fu that I know to defend myself against these people who, again, as a matter of absolute fact, are trying to hurt me and have successfully done so in the past, nearly killing me. That's all you say while you make up bullshit. And what the holy fuck are you referring to about the Easter gathering? I don't do Easter. There's never been any open discussions about the past, about the person who mistreated me and your mom with us in the family. Everyone but him refuses to believe it happened, and our grandma never allowed any discussion of it. So put your proof of that person's medical history on here for all of us to see. I've never seen any of this. Of course, again, there's been witnesses to her rant a few years ago, which I believe was on Easter, but it was at a family gathering. I don't really keep track of these things, you know. I don't have eidetic memory or photographic memory, so that's why, you know, the witnesses. There were witnesses. You know? Witnesses. They witnessed this rant. They witnessed this happen. So she's saying it didn't happen, but there were witnesses. There were witnesses. So, oh shit, there was other people there. I can bring them in on this and stop the gaslighting, right? I've never been told by anyone before last Thursday that the person who had mistreated me had ever had a diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, this is wrong. There were witnesses. And I saw it happen a few years ago. So, I come back. You have access to the proof that the person who mistreated you and his medical diagnosis. You said the exact same things about his diagnosis in front of witnesses in our family years ago. You were at a family gathering sometime after Grandma's funeral. You leaned over the island in the kitchen at the farm and said something like, well, what was wrong with the person who mistreated us that caused him to mistreat us? And I said, I don't know what specifically the cause was, but during his court-mandated therapy, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Which you replied with your rant about how he didn't have post-traumatic stress disorder and how some people are just born mean and evil. I believe, at a bare minimum, that some of my brothers were around to overhear this conversation. You can ask them. As for what specifically I said last week, you've already stated that you have audio processing disorder, so how can you be so sure of what specifically I said? And why don't you simply ask your roommate if he overheard the question? And why won't you answer the questions like, what was my motivation? And why would I say that? Why, in the middle of a conversation about preliminary diagnoses from other people, would I instantaneously pivot to my private opinion on someone else's diagnosis? And when I apologized for my own actions the night before despite my illness, why would I suddenly change my mind and decide an illness is an excuse for any behavior? As for the person who mistreated you's diagnosis, why are you so adamant about this? His medical records are available for anyone to view. If other members of his unit got post-traumatic stress disorder, do you have any evidence that he alone was somehow immune? We've established that post-traumatic stress disorder is not an excuse to abuse your children, and illness is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. I've given you all of my medical records. I organized the family therapist. I've been doing the legwork for over 6 straight years. I think it's high time that you three get any evidence for your arguments whatsoever. If you don't think that he has post-traumatic stress disorder, prove it, and take that fight up with his doctors, not me. Stop this incessant crusade against me for repeating the opinions of a doctor from 30 years ago or more. Please stop shooting the messenger. So then I come back. Family members, who may include my brothers, were present for your rant in the kitchen at the farm years ago that you personally believe that the person who mistreated you doesn't have post-traumatic stress disorder, and some people are just born mean and evil. We have witnesses. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish with this endless crusade against a doctor's diagnosis from over 30 years ago, but please just leave me out of it. Stop shooting the messenger, please. I'm just repeating what I've heard. Stop punishing me for it. It doesn't excuse his actions, so I don't get this vehement response from you against it. Find the records, argued with the doctor that made that call, accept that it doesn't excuse his actions, and leave me out of it. And, of course, if I'm making a bullshit, define what precisely that bullshit is. If you have a specific complaint, state it specifically. Then we can work together to gain evidence of the truth. So she comes back. She says, I didn't say that he doesn't have it. I said I've never been told that before. This is the first I've heard of it. Why would I have any reason to ever access his military or medical records? That's an invasion of privacy. He's never presented any of it and asked me to read it, so why would I? Remember just a few minutes ago when she says, put your proof of this person who mistreated us and their medical history on here for all to see? And again, she's saying that this didn't happen a few years ago. But, you know, there were witnesses. Yeah, at this point in time, the burden of proof is on her to prove that this didn't happen. I've done my part. So, and of course, whenever it comes time for her to take action, she's got some moral qualms about this. Oh, that's an invasion of privacy. When she's telling me to do it, put it on here for everyone to see. Whip it out, stick it on the table. We're going to grab a ruler, goddammit. We're going to see exactly how this is, you know. But whenever, it's this pearl clutching, right? That's what they call it, pearl clutching. Asking me to do it? How dare you? It's morally blah, 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 you know. I said, I couldn't possibly. Do it. Oh, I couldn't possibly do it myself. Do it. Fucking whip it out, son of a bitch. Oh, I can't do it myself. The fun never stops, does it? You see why I'm, considering my family counselor in our very first session, he said, you might want to cut contact with your family. You see why I'm considering it? This is a waste of my time. There's nothing good that can come out. These people aren't going to change. They don't care that they're killing other people. They don't care that they're hurting other people. They don't care that they have evidence that they nearly killed other people. They don't care. They don't care at all. The only thing I ask is to treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. Nope. I can't ask for a small enough favor. I can't get enough evidence for them to believe, what my doctors say. And they'll continue coming at me from what my doctor said. This will never stop. It'll never stop. So, cut contact. I know, they're just going to focus their negative attention on somebody else, but I can't do anything about that. Whenever somebody else dies, maybe other people in the family will cut contact or something. Once they get tired of it, they'll start going to therapy. They'll learn the kung fu needed to keep these people away. They'll cut contact, and maybe they'll come crawling back to me. I don't know. This week, my interpersonal psychotherapy group said, hey, this is temporary, right? You don't have to cut contact forever. You can slowly but surely re-add people into your life once you've properly vetted them and even had your medical professionals give you the okay to re-add these people in your life. And I said, oh, yeah, that makes me feel a lot better. So, okay. I've only ever said to you last week that it isn't the reason for his abusive behavior. I restated the question for clarity because I do indeed sometimes get things wrong because of the auditory processing disorder, and you repeated that it was indeed what you were saying. That's you making the statement that yes, this person has or had post-traumatic stress disorder, and yes, that was the reason for his actions. No, it wasn't. Didn't say that, and of course her roommate probably overheard this situation, so she can just ask him to confirm. But instead of that, she just keeps making this claim over and over again. This is why I said, hey, from now on, let's just record our conversation so that we don't have to go through this she said bullshit. But at this point in time, you're refusing to ask your roommate about what precisely was said. You're just being lazy, refusing to get any sort of evidence whatsoever that this is true. And whoever claims to have heard this exchange between you and me is welcome to tell me about it, because I 100% do not believe you. You like to say things to hurt people and don't believe that you're being hurtful because you're so deeply and incredibly right. So this is another claim. You are hurtful on purpose. This is what you do. You are hurtful on purpose. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if I am so hurtful on purpose, why am I offering to record all of my my spoken conversations with them from here on out? Why do I continue to give you the unedited, aside from these people's names? Why do I continue to share as much of this as possible on social media? Don't you think that a couple people could come in and post me on ITA, on Reddit, on Am I the Asshole on Reddit? Don't you think that I am subjecting myself to the opinions of the masses and everything while doing stuff like this? Why would I offer to record my conversations with her from now here on out if I am just a mean person on purpose? And where's her evidence for this? Again, so it doesn't matter. Narcissism, what it does to your brain, it makes it so you cannot fathom that you might possibly be wrong. You cannot, that part of your brain is disabled. You cannot fathom that it's even possible for you to be the one that's incorrect in any given situation. So because of that, she can't fathom it. So she starts her brain is going, well, I can't possibly be the wrong one out of the two of us. It has to be his fault. So she just keeps coming up with more and more wild, unverifiable ways that it might be possible that I'm the one who's incorrect. She doesn't have to have a squidge of evidence. Evidence doesn't matter to anybody. You fucking try to talk to a fucking flat earther about why they think the earth is flat. It's endless. It's endless with it. It doesn't matter. Evidence doesn't matter to anybody. It's data. Nobody gives a shit about data. It's like whenever you see, you look at the side of the Big Mac and it says that it's got a squadrillion calories in there and it's going to take you 82 years of running on the treadmill at 10 miles an hour in order to burn it all off. Nobody goes, oh shit, and then puts down the Big Mac. They fucking eat it anyways. It's data. Nobody gives a shit. So this evidence, it doesn't change anybody's mind. It's evidence. So anyway, we have witnesses for your rant in the kitchen at the farm years ago, sometime after the funeral. You have objective proof and witness testimony that you can gather to prove or disprove the incident occurred, and you didn't hear about his diagnosis years before. The burden of proof is on you. I've been doing this legwork for over 6 years. If it didn't happen, it's your turn to prove it. You say it's an invasion of privacy, but you just asked me to invade his privacy on your behalf and post it for all to see. So when it's your time to act, you have qualms about it. But when you ask me to do it, you do so without thought. It's this sort of one-sided behavior that led to the preliminary diagnosis for my parents. We're both human and equal. What applies to me must also apply to you. That's not something that the narcissist can fathom. What applies to me can apply to you? No, they're the main character. You're some fucking NBC. You're some extra or whatever. They're the star of the show. You're nobody. They can't fathom that they could possibly be on the same level as anybody else ever. They're not two humans. They're the fucking main human, and everybody else is a bunch of fucking cannon fodder. Anyways. It's this sort of one-sided behavior that led for the preliminary diagnosis for my parents. We're both human and equal. What applies to me must also apply to you. If I said what you think I said, it's up to you to prove it. So why would you get his medical records? Because you asked me to. You did not restate the question for clarity. Your roommate might have overheard the exchange, so go ask him. If I said what you think I said, prove it. Going from believing one thing the night before to believing the exact opposite is not what people do. When someone does a crime, they have a motive. So what was my motive for saying something mean just to hurt people? And why, ladies and gentlemen, would I offer to record myself in all future conversations simply so she cannot make this claim? If you believe that I say mean things just to hurt people, surely you have some evidence and specific examples of this occurring, right? My daughters don't think I say things just to hurt people, so the burden of proof is on you. Does the image you have in your head about me match any proof or evidence here in reality? The doctors, scientists, academics, and lawmakers are in agreement that I'm a pretty nice guy while reviewing my unedited interactions and medical records that you have access to. Have you found even one singular interaction in my medical records that you can prove either didn't happen or happened differently from how I described it? Very important. So celebration is where celebration does, right? So this is a triumph. I've successfully defended myself from attack. But, these types of attacks can be devastating to somebody who doesn't have this type of kung fu. Again, the Violence Prevention Center of Belleville, Illinois accepts patients without charge. It is free. If you want to learn how to defend yourself from abusive people who want to harm you, then that's where you can go. That's where I learned all of this. And you can show them this to any of the abuse counselors working there, and they can clearly see whether or not I was the asshole in this whole situation. So, of course, these attacks can be devastating. During the session last week, she said something that kind of stood out to me. Towards the beginning of the session, my oldest aunt was sitting there with my family therapist and said that she had taken offense to something I said about her. I had said that my mother and her suffered from the same abuse from the same person, but she sort of acts like it didn't happen to her. She takes this different approach. And because of that, it's a disassociative strategy. That's what I've read about. I've got a bachelor's degree in fucking sustainability from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I get to repeat the things that doctors have said. That's why I cite these people, right? Because I'm not the authority here. This is what this person said about this. Here's the evidence, right? Citing my sources. So it's a disassociative strategy. One of the disassociative strategies is to my mother likes to overshare with a lot of people. That's her disassociative strategy, or her strategy for dealing with the abuse that she suffered in her lifetime. But my oldest aunt, she likes to pretend that this didn't happen to her, that it happened to somebody else. And as part of that, she bottles up her own emotions. Now, people in general bottle up their emotions. One of the things that my grandmother did shortly before her death, for a few years, she was in Safe Connections in St. Louis, Missouri. And they were really telling her, like, hey, you can't bottle up your emotions. Everybody does it. Everybody's passive aggressive and everything. It's not healthy. It's one of these human things. It's like the seafood diet. You see food and you eat it. The human response is that, oh, I need fat to survive the ice age. That's written into our DNA. So we see food and we fucking eat it. But that's not a healthy strategy, right? We've got these problems with obesity and whatnot all over the globe, so it's one of those things that we have to control, and bottling up the little things until you eventually blow up on somebody and ruin the relationship or even end up attacking somebody. Of course, that's not a good strategy. You actually have to come in and every single little thing say, hey, I didn't like that. No matter, you can't let anything slip. And say like, hey, whenever you said that, I felt this way. And I don't like feeling that way. Could you maybe not do that anymore? That'd be really nice. I don't like feeling that way. If you don't want me to feel that way, I'm just letting you know that when you do this, I feel this way. So, and I don't like feeling that way. Could you cut it out if you care about me at all? Yeah, so you have to, every little thing, you have to, say it out loud. You have to nip it in the bud, as they used to say. So, it's that sort of thing. But my oldest aunt, whenever she bottles up her emotions, she bottles them up for a really long time. This isn't like a dude bottling up his emotions, and then suddenly he's fist fighting with his best friend in a bar somewhere and ends up arrested or whatever. It's not one of those things where, you dudes fist fight each other, after they've bottled up their emotions for too long and they blow up in the middle of a family gathering or something. And then pretty soon they're knocking back beers, saying, hey, nice hit, That kind of shit isn't acceptable anymore either. I can remember hearing stories whenever I was active duty in the Navy. I can remember hearing stories of just about 10, 20 years before I joined active duty in 2007. They would say, like, people on the ship, whenever they had disagreements, they would bottle them up, and eventually they'd be like, all right, let's hit the brig or something. They'd head down there, and somebody would stand watch, and then they would just go at it. They'd just start punching and kicking each other, and eventually all that aggression would be out, and they could get back to work. Maybe with some bruises and a black eye or two, but they can get back to work. That shit's not acceptable anymore. Even that's not acceptable anymore. And apparently, I was reading some fucking men are from Mars, women are from Venus shit. This was about 20 years ago or so, whenever I was reading this stuff. But whenever I was reading this stuff, they said that whenever women blow up and everything, they don't do the fist fight thing and knocking back beers afterwards and saying nice hit. Instead, they blow up and it ruins the relationship. It doesn't deepen the relationship like, whenever men start hitting each other, which was, like I said, more acceptable back then than it is now, but still not acceptable. So they said, it's a genuine problem. Said women in particular have to learn how to voice every little grievance and everything. But like I said, I was reading that 20 years ago or so. The thing is, it's a skill that everybody has to learn. Just like everybody has to learn not to, go to the buffet and just, like, with hands, just stuff your fucking face to survive the ice age that isn't coming, Just like we all have to learn to control ourselves and not eat nothing but candy bars 24/7. Just like how we have to learn that self-discipline, we also have to learn to, nip it in the bud. Every little thing that irks you, don't bottle it up and explode and everything. So anyway, she was saying towards the beginning of our session last week to my family counselor that, I took offense whenever he said that. And, I do bottle things up and I do explode and I did self-harm and try to harm others. And that is a pretty explosive thing. But, and she paused after having spoke it all out loud. But I guess it was his tone that I took offense to. She can't possibly fathom that she might be wrong, that her reaction to my words was wrong. I was 100% right by her own admission in front of the family counselor. She admitted that I was right in front of the family counselor. Then she said it was my tone. Why tone? Because it's not something that you can prove. Of course, take the actual recording, the way I said these things, and then put it out on the internet in the very last video that I posted on my YouTube, And then you can submit it to the world and say, am I the asshole, ladies and gentlemen? Did I use a tone that the majority of people would say that that was a bad tone? Either way, the objective reality doesn't change. If someone says, you were a fucking sailor, that tone doesn't change the fact that I was a sailor. It's just he's taking offense and yelling at me for 2.5 hours from 1:30 a.m. all the way to 4 o'clock in the morning. 2.5 hours because of my tone. She admitted that in front of the family therapist. Boy, oh boy. The narcissistic mind can't let its host think the words, maybe I'm wrong. It can't let the person suffering from this clinical level narcissist think, maybe I'm wrong. So they have to, there's this black hole in their mind where maybe I'm wrong should be. Instead, it's got to be somebody else. And so they'll put anything in that place without any sort of evidence whatsoever. And then, of course, they won't look for evidence that they're correct. And they certainly won't do the scientific process, which is to try to test their hypothesis and gather some evidence that they might be wrong. No. What they'll do is they'll run back to their yes men. They'll run back to their flying monkeys. They'll run back to those people. And they'll say, let me give you a skewed version of reality. They're not going to record anything or anything like that and let their friends listen to the recording. They're not going to give that much leeway in opinion. They're going to give this, this skewed version of the world with no evidence whatsoever, and then say, now, Aita, am I the asshole? And their yes men and flying monkeys are going to say, oh yeah, you were completely right there and everything. Because if they don't, they're fired. You lose a lover, a friend, whatever, and they're going to go poison the well against you to all their other friends. It's that poisonous, parasitic relationship and everything. But if you got the kung fu to avoid them entirely, then who gives a shit? There are 8 billion people on the planet, give or take. These people are still a minority. Get the kung fu to defend against them, and then move on with your life. And also remember the other things. The other things I always recommend to people, the stuff that Dancing Rabbit Eco Village does, very specifically, because they don't have any building codes, they live on less than $3,000 a year, and they're in Rutledge, Missouri, so they're one state away, because I live in the great state of Illinois, where I was born and raised. And so, $3,000 a year, that's not that much. So, all because they don't have building codes. So, buying some tax sale land that doesn't have, in a county, in an area that doesn't have building codes, building a log cabin if you've got the trees in your property. That's the only reason that the pioneers did it, is because there was trees there. They were already chopping them down for firewood, so they said, hey, let's make a house out of this too. And regions of the world where they didn't have trees in the property, they made adobe houses, right? So you make yourself an adobe house, something like that. A Celtic roundhouse. If you live in a certain meridian, you can make an adobe house, but you have to vitrify the bricks the way that primitive technology on YouTube does, to sort of bake the bricks, because or else it's just a sun-dried brick, right? And sun-dried bricks, whenever they get wet, they turn back into mud. So what happens is that there's groundwater, and it creeps up the walls. So the Celtics, they said, hey, for the first 3 or 4 feet of wall, you need stone, essentially. But you don't need stone. You can just vitrify, your bricks the way that primitive technology does. In those videos that he does on YouTube where he vitrifies bricks, he actually puts them in a bucket of water, and he comes back like a day or a week later and he says, look, it's still shaped like a brick. It has not turned back into mud. So he's right, so 3 or 4 feet of whatever, and then now you got a free house. You can look at John Jandai, Life is Easy. He has a video on his YouTube channel about how to put together a home out of mud. Of course, Dome Gaia and Dome Gaia methods and stuff like that have methods that you can make a dome, that way you don't have to use John Jandai's methods of having free walls but an expensive roof, which is a very old-timey thing. That's what they used to say. They say, my house was free, but my roof was expensive. That's what they used to say way back in the day. And that was because it was a log cabin. They were living in a log cabin. But, so, digging, make a house out of dirt blocks, like around Minecraft or something, live in it. Use the Matt Reisinger's, I forget where the hell he got it from, but he always champions the double wall method, so making 2 walls and stuffing the hollow in between walls with a bunch of insulation, whether it's just, it's hay, straw bale houses, they're pretty well insulated. Straw bales, they were expensive, but hay, that's just cut grass. It has the same insulative qualities, so cut a bunch of grass, tie it together, stuff like that, and really, have an insulated house. And that gets rid of your rent and it gets rid of your mortgage, and all you have to pay is property taxes now. Now just dig a well, learn how to grow your own food, garden a little bit. Now you've reduced or eliminated your, learn how to hunt and fish. It reduces or eliminates your grocery bill soon enough. Like I said, dig your own well, set up a rainwater catchment system, or do what one lady in Litchfield said that she does. She in Litchfield, Illinois, apparently the state won't allow you to catch rainwater, but she said that she just bought a pool, and the state didn't require her to fill it herself, so she just waited for rainwater to fill it. So that's how she got rainwater. So that's a way to get water. Now you don't have a water bill. Either use a composting toilet or an outhouse, or dig your own septic system. Now you don't have a sewage bill. If you live far enough out in the country, at least here in the great state of Illinois, you can burn your trash as long as it's very specific type of trash, and you can contact the EPA website about that. Now you've gotten rid of your trash bill. So, and buy with all the money that you save, buy an electric vehicle, and then now you've gotten rid of your gas bill. What do you have left after all these bills are gone, and you've set up a couple of solar panels and everything, and now you don't have an electricity bill anymore, and you're powering your electric vehicle and everything, and that's the way you're getting transportation? What do you have now? Well, you've got property taxes and you've got car insurance, and I've seen car insurance for as low as $1 a day. And I've also seen property taxes that start at $16. Around this area that I'm currently living in, it starts at $16. You got to be zoned very specific to get that base price, but it's not much. $16 per year, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So why do I tell you to do all that? Because sometimes you have to deal with narcissists at work. You have to deal with abusive situations at work. And I tell you all that so that you can reduce your bills, so that you don't need a particular job. And at the very least, you can reduce your exposure. You can reduce your exposure at your job. And of course, by the way, if you make less than 2 times the poverty line, you, much like myself, can get your internet through a hotspot through PCsForPeople.com. That's what I do. $16 a month. That is the internet that I get. It's unlimited. It's through a hotspot, so it's not the most fast internet, but it's there. So $16 a month, $16 a year, and $1 a day for auto insurance. Yeah, you can work a few hours a month at Mickey D's to pay for all of that. and you won't have to deal with these people who are intent on attacking you, and you don't have to deal with these people, you know, who would get together with you but literally attack you with their fists and feet. You never have to get into an abusive relationship ever again. Centerstone in Alton, Illinois offers psychotherapy for free of many different types, you know, different types of therapy for free. The abuse counselors at the Violence Prevention Center of Illinois, they offer abuse counseling for free. You know, use your resources and everything. And I wish the absolute best for you. I share these types of things because, you know, just because I have the kung fu to defend myself against these people doesn't mean everybody does. I'm trying to do as best as I can to put this out here so other people can get these resources, and hopefully in the 36 years that I've been here on Earth, I can actually help somebody out. Because the rest of the time, I don't really know if I've helped, you know. My entire time active duty as a Master at Arms, I was basically a gate guard most of the time, so, you know, like I said in this little thing, I never shot at anybody, I never got shot at. So, did I prevent terrorists from going into the bases that I was stationed to? I don't know. There was nobody that came up to me and was like, Allah Akbar, can I come on base? You know, nobody said that. So I don't know whether or not I helped at all or made a difference at all, which is exactly why once my 4 years was up, I decided there has to be something more out there. There has to be some way I can make an impact and a difference. So I'm just hoping that this helps anybody. I'm just hoping I can make any amount of difference. Soon enough, of course. By the end of the year, I plan on cutting contact with the vast majority of my family. I'm not sure how I'm going to accomplish that right now, but that's the plan. So these types of videos will quit unless I start going over really old interactions with abusive and narcissistic people. But besides for that, you know, I hope it helps. Thanks for watching. And now that we're at the end, of course, I can remind you that you can go in the YouTube settings and listen to this at 2 or 3 or 4 times speed. I'll try to put that in the description of this video so that, you know, people can get the information without, you know, wasting all the time. But there's always, like Tim Ferriss says, there's always going to be a market for long-form content. Now, I believe him, regardless of the 1 or 2 views I get on each of these videos. So, I hope this helps somebody. Thanks for watching. Have a nice night. And good night.